Hello, welcome everybody. This is the Tips for Building Confidence in the Budgeting Process webinar brought to you by Corporate Renaissance Group. So the agenda today, I'll go through a little introduction of myself. We're going to be going through the main topic of budgeting challenges and tips for building confidence in the budgeting process. And then we will show a demo of one of our budgeting platforms, which is called Board. In our toolkit, we do offer a couple options, including Board and Adaptive Insights, but today's webinar will demonstrate Board today. And of course, if you want a demonstration of the other product, we do offer another webinar for that, and we can offer one-on-one webinars if required. So I'm Thomas Ironstone. I'm the manager of the Corporate Performance Management and Business Intelligence Division at Corporate Renaissance Group. My background and work I do for Corporate Renaissance Group is advisory and implementation services in public and private sector organizations across all industries. Example, manufacturing, tech, services, distribution, beverage, healthcare, insurance, finance, utilities, and many more. So the key focus of today's webinar is tips for building confidence in the budgeting cycle. So as we know, the budgeting process is a critical part of corporate performance management. Many organizations face tremendous difficulties with this process and wish to drive more value out of their budgeting process. So we're going to look at some of the challenges and some tips for overcoming those challenges, and how we can actually drive more value and confidence in the budgeting process. So a common challenge is that participants of the budgeting process are unclear of the understanding of the steps in the budget cycle. So this could be the requirements, milestones, and deadlines. So they know what happens each year, and many times they'll have to go to finance to get clarity on what they need to do or help as far as what's required from them. So a tip that we typically suggest to our clients is to help establish a clear and consistent communication plan. So this should go out each year in advance of the actual budget cycle. So it typically outlines the milestones in the budget process, when things are due, all the steps, who's assigned to those steps, as well as clear assumptions as well. So if there's certain assumptions that they need to factor in that they should be aware of, that should be there and clear in that documentation. And that typically gets distributed electronically to all individuals involved in the budgeting process. Also, typically creating a visual and transparent workflow with milestones and deadlines is also very valuable. So we'll show some examples of this later, but you can actually create a visual workflow process so people can actually see the steps and the milestones and the dates. And then usually having something visual also helps the understanding for those individuals. Another common challenge is that the budgeting cycle is a labor-intensive process to actually administer. So many organizations are working in Excel, or maybe they're working in legacy budgeting platforms, but typically to make updates and changes and actually administer this on an annual basis, let alone actually even doing any forecasting, can be very labor-intensive and time-consuming. So a tip here is that many budgeting solutions on the market today allow for the creation of structured templates, and this is very powerful. So the main thing is, when you're creating these structured templates, is that typically just with a filter, you're able to filter between different departments, for example. You just have to create one template, where typically in Excel, you'd have to create multiple workbooks and ship those out. But this can be controlled inside budgeting solutions by using multidimensional data structures in your templates, which budgeting solutions allow, and security layered on top of that. So people can only access specific departments or divisions that they should have access to actually input or see data for. And these templates are used to capture all of the budget data. And what's really powerful as well is that when they input the data into these templates, is that it gets automatically written to an underlying database and then rolled up to all of your reports, for example. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But this is definitely very powerful, because when you're working in Excel and you're trying to pull all this data together, it could be a very long turnaround to actually collect it and then put it together into the reports, send it out back to the budget managers so they can review even like their bottom line, for example, and then maybe they have to make changes, get sent back to finance, and then reports get sent back out again. And you really want to avoid that labor-intensive process, because a lot of these budgeting solutions do address that that need. And also a key thing that I was mentioning as well is that templates in these budgeting platforms are multidimensional. So all budgeting contributors are usually using the same template, and they're applying filters to toggle between different departments, accounts, etc. Another common challenge in the budgeting process for many organizations is actually access to the budget. And a tip for overcoming this is no matter where budget contributors are, make it easier for them to submit their budgets on time. You get, and we hear this a lot, is people are busy, they're traveling, they're maybe going their office, between the office and home, and maybe they don't have access to a workbook or a server where a file is located to be able to actually continue to update their budgets, and it gets really close to the deadline and people are scrambling. So to help alleviate some of that constraint and that pain, is that provide them many options to access the actual budget, to be able to input the budget or review it. So there's a few options, and most applications provide some combination of these. A common one is just a client install on a workstation. So that's just if you go onto your machine, there's an icon, you launch it, and then it opens up your budgeting software. So that's one example. Another one is web access, and this is definitely more common now. And so regardless of whether you're on your machine or another machine, you can go to a web browser, log in, and then you have access to your budget to input the data directly in the browser, as opposed to having to open an Excel spreadsheet or launch a client only on your machine. So the web access definitely provides a lot of flexibility. Another one is Excel integration, and this is really important for offline viewing and data collection. So we know that many organizations are moving away from Excel, but there's many use cases we do see where there's specific users that need that offline data collection ability. And this is if they're traveling, for example, they're in the plane and they need to input data. It's important that they have something like this where they can input the data into a spreadsheet, and then once they, say, land and they can connect back to the internet, then it can sync back to their budgeting database. And I'll show you an example of that later during the demonstration. And another growing one as well is mobile access, and this is mainly for the reporting side. So we don't typically see too much data entry happening through mobile devices, sometimes iPads and Windows tablets, but not necessarily your smartphone. But with the mobile access, it definitely provides individuals the ability to go and look at the reports. And if there's, say, a budget manager or a director or senior management, they just want to keep tabs on things, they can just go to their phone, log in, and then see the up-to-date status of the budget. Another challenge is that budget contributors have difficulty preparing purely dollar-based budgets. So it's not meaningful to them. So that, for example, when they're inputting expenses or revenue, and then they're required to go into their spreadsheets, or even into, like, if you have a budget software today, if you set it up in such a way where they're just inputting dollars, sometimes this is not really meaningful to the budget contributors. So a tip here is that where possible, try to understand the underlying drivers of the financials. So when you're designing these budget templates, is that if you can break it out into a driver-based structure, this allows for everything from flexing the budget by making tweaks to the quantities or the unit prices or unit costs. And having those volumetrics definitely provides some value to the end users. One is for preparing the budget to make it more meaningful to them, and also to provide some further analysis on the variance. So if you have that data, you can look at the volumetrics and you can see maybe you're below or under budget due to the volume and not necessarily due to the price, for example. So that's just something to think about definitely, where possible, having that set up can make it a little bit easier for folks, as well as provide a little bit more value from the analysis. Another key challenge is slow turnaround for budget revisions. So this is definitely a big pain. And the tip here is that using most modern budget platforms, because they're able to quickly collect and aggregate the budget data in real time, budget contributors and management can automatically or instantaneously see the data rolled up to a consolidated view, and they can see what the budget looks like. So if they need to make tweaks up or down, they can communicate that sooner as opposed to having to wait for the report to be generated. And this is definitely very important so that they can provide timely feedback and also reduce the turnaround time for budget revisions. So it definitely relieves some of the strain during that budget cycle, where that back and forth can definitely eat up a lot of time. Another key challenge is accounts are not synchronized with the accounting systems. So whether using Excel spreadsheets or an accounting, or a budget platform, if you're not synchronized to the accounting system, you're going to hear this a lot, as where the budget managers say, "Oh, I don't have an account for this," and it's possible because the budget software wasn't synchronized to the accounting system. So if a new account was added and it's not in your budget package, then they're not able to budget for that item, or they budget somewhere else where they shouldn't be, or they're going to finance and asking to add it, and if it's manual, it just creates a headache. So where possible, definitely try to integrate your budget model with your accounting system. So having a routine pull chart of accounts will ensure that all accounts are available for budgeting, as well as the trial balance and transactions are up to date for variance analysis and comparative reporting. Another key challenge is constantly recreating budget reports and presentations when revisions are made to the data. So this mainly comes towards the end of the budget cycle, when the budget review is being done, say whether it's at the senior management level, board level, and finance is creating all these reports and constantly regenerating them because changes are made, or maybe they found an error and they need to recreate those reports. If that's manual, that can create a big headache on finance and be a really big drain to resources as well. So having something like an integrative budgeting reporting platform, so not just inputting budgets, but actually getting your reporting out of it, it can enable seamless updates of the budget-related reporting and presentations. So if changes are made to the underlying budget data, it's automatically refreshed in the reports. It's not a manual collection of the data to have to then recreate them and present them to management. And we'll show you some examples of that in a little bit. Another key challenge here is that there's so much time spent on administration and no time spent on analysis. And this is just a really common theme for years. And definitely having tools where we can automate some of these processes and focus on more value add aspects of the finance cycle, it definitely provides a lot of value to the organization as a whole. So when you have a robust CPM, which is a corporate performance management platform, they go beyond just budgeting and reporting. These platforms can also allow for data visualization, dashboarding, scorecards, and even drill down into variance analysis and trends. So again, just going beyond data collection and budgeting, and even just normal management financial reporting, having all of that additional functionality built in can provide a lot of value to the organization, providing that that cohesive picture of organizational performance. So the product that I'm going to be demonstrating today is Board, but as I mentioned, we have other solutions as well. But this is just one example, just to illustrate how some of these tips can be achieved, just to provide a visual demonstration of use cases of these tips. So Board is an all-in-one business intelligence and corporate performance management system. So of course it does budgeting, planning, and forecasting, but it also does dashboarding, strategic management, financial reporting, financial consolidation, and much more. So of course, accessibility. Board provides you the ability to submit budgets on time. So whether it's you're connecting over the web, through a mobile client, Excel add-in, tablet, it has that flexibility, and I'll show you that in a second. The clear budget process and workflow. So as I mentioned before, a key tip was to have a platform that will allow you to clearly visualize and articulate all of the steps in the budget process and who's required for each of those items and milestones. It definitely provides more transparency to the folks involved and allows them to prepare better. Another tip I was talking about was making it meaningful. So having driver-based planning is critical. So if you can break it beyond just dollar terms and put into price and quantity, this can provide a lot of value for the planning process and also for analysis. Support with explanations. So this is definitely critical. So again, with your budgets, you make assumptions. And so it's important to explain those assumptions. When you go back and look at it next year, you want to understand what you're thinking, because I'm sure many of us wouldn't remember what we input a year ago. So having that explanation can provide a lot of value and reduce turnaround time for trying to interpret even what we had done last year. Reforecasting, so the ability to make updates as actuals come in. Board, amongst other platforms and budgeting, provide the ability to do reforecasting. So the actuals come in, you can get a forecast for the end of the year and see how you're trending against the budget. And of course, all the reporting that you'd want to get out of a true CPM platform. You have all the management reporting with integrated income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow. And of course, for management, typically some more flashier executive summary style reporting needs. You can even create interactive flipbooks where you can have all your charts, commentary, and even have filters and drill down in those interactive flipbooks. And on the data visualization side, a variety of different objects. You can visualize your data, drill down into it, provide some visual cues so you can understand trends, and if there's any alerts as well, can help interpret and drive action throughout the year when you're monitoring your budget against actuals. And of course, getting a little more sophisticated is predictive analytics. So leveraging historical data and data mining techniques to predict what's going to happen in the future. So Board offers this functionality. So we're going to take a quick look at Board so you can just sort of see some of those things actually what's inside the platform. And of course, if there's questions at the end, I'll address those. So with Board, as I mentioned, one key challenge and tip was to establish a clear and consistent communication plan and also create visual and transparent workflow. So with a tool like Board, it actually allows you to create a visual workflow. So an example here is where we can actually outline all of the steps in our budget cycle and have clear steps and timelines for each of those items. So example here, we have a budget workflow, the process flow, and all the steps in the budget cycle. And as a budget administrator, I can see how many people are in progress, who's submitted, who's been rejected at each step in the workflow. So you can make this very sophisticated, or also keep it as simple as you want. But having that visual cue definitely provides a lot of value to the organization. And also here for Progress Monitor, for all the individuals involved in all the budget managers, who's been approved, who's been rejected, and then it allows you to keep track of all those individuals reporting to you, so you can keep track of where they are in the budget cycle and if they need some support and help to actually get completed and meet our deadlines. And of course, you can interact with your email. So if you want to send alerts or messages, you can use broadcasting to do that. Another one was the labor-intensive process. So the idea here with the best practice was to create a structured template where you can just leverage things like filters. So in this, compared to say Excel, the idea here is we can create one budget template, and regardless of who logs in, security controls what data they have access to input data against. So the users log in, they can access their budgets, They can input them and update them, and they'll only see what they're required to see. So this can be restricted based on anything like department, cost center, company, accounts. The restriction can be really set at any level. And again, you just create one template, and then when you roll forward to your next budget, you don't have to recreate these templates again next year. Another common challenge and a tip is that I mentioned access. So a lot of the budgeting platforms now can be accessible over the web in addition to having, say, a client install. But another powerful feature here is being able to leverage Excel integration. So what I mentioned was offline data collection. So for any budget template, you can say export to Excel, and then we get that in Excel. And now when I'm on the plane, see a copy of the same structure, I can make updates to this. So for example, I'm going to say this is 600,000, this is 400,000, and 300,000. When I can save this document, then when I land, I can reconnect to my network securely, hit save, and then when I go back into the budgeting platform the next day, you'll see, or the same day, if I refresh this, you'll notice that these are going to update. So 600, 400, 300. And the integration works both ways. So if I change this to 400,000, I hit save, and I go back to Excel and hit refresh, you'll see that this is going to become 400,000. So the integration works both ways. So definitely having that accessibility and flexibility can help speed along that budget process. Another common challenge here is making it meaningful, and so the idea is, a tip here is to actually break it down into drivers. So I'll show you a good example where we can break it down into price and quantity. So in this example here, we're focusing on drivers. So an example here is unit price and cost. In this case, you can maintain tables that are centralized. And so when you update these tables, any volumes that are budgeted against these items would then flow through into your overall results. So if you want to do scenario analysis on increase on prices or unit costs, you can just make the updates to those tables, and then it will all flow through. So in this example here, we're maintaining unit price and cost. You can have multiple versions of those. And then at the end of the day, when they're doing their budgeting, if they're inputting, say, strictly volumes, for example, it's all going to flow through, and they'll see their output with the units, the price, the cost, and then here, in this example, they see the margin. But this applies for other scenarios, such as employee benefits, for example. You can use the same unit driver approach or other types of volumetric type expenses as well. So another item here was the reporting side. So as we're inputting our budgets, being able to have that up-to-date results. So of course, with an integrated budgeting and planning software, you typically get some reporting out of that. So in this case, as budgets are being input, me at the management level, I can go to my financial statements and I can actually see the consolidated budget right away in the financial statement view. So in this case, I'm looking at, say, my P&L. I can see the updated budget as it's being input. I could filter on different divisions and see how each of them are doing, even in the middle of the budget cycle. Another key aspect as well for the tip for improving the budget process is the integration with your accounting package. So of course, our budgets, our reports are all based potentially on our chart of accounts, and as well as we're pulling in trial balances and transaction detail. So the idea is if we have integration set up, we can have up-to-date data. We run our integration. Integration has been run successfully. Now we have updated accounts, updated trial balances in our reporting and budgeting model. Another item I brought up was constantly recreating reports. So I showed an example of reports with inside a budget platform, reporting platform, is that you can create charts as well with inside, say, a PowerPoint presentation. So again, these are just objects. You can create them, and these are actually synced to the budgeting platform. So if any updates get made, I don't have to recreate these charts. I simply hit refresh, and then it will go back to the database, and it'll refresh my workbook. It'll update all of my charts if any changes have been made. So simple refresh, and then my budgets get flown through, or my budgets and actuals get flown through to my presentation. And finally, the last item I mentioned was so much time spent on budget administration, no time spent for analysis. So a tip was having that data visualization aspect to it as well. So you can actually, the scorecarding aspect of it, so you can drive a little bit more value beyond just budgeting and planning and management and financial reporting, is to allow the users to get a little bit more analysis during the year. So of course, this is the dashboarding, the KPIs that they want to see. So the powerful visualization definitely provides a lot of value to management, even at the operational level. So of course, pulling all that data together into one system, whether you're pulling actuals, whether you're pulling budgets, even data from other systems such as your HRIS, you can pull it all together in one view, see your actuals against budget, and you have that up-to-date analysis, and you can drill into the data, and you can give the end users that power so they don't have to constantly go to finance to get this information. Really, the data is at their fingertips, and they can continue to drill in and get all that information they may need. All right, so that was the presentation. So of course, if there's any questions, I will open that up right now. All right, we have a question here on integration. So the question is, which accounting packages can this system integrate with? Well, as I mentioned, we have multiple platforms, and typically our platforms can integrate really with most accounting packages, as long as the drivers and your accounting packages have really been made, kept up to date. But the typical saying is all ODBC, OLDB compliant databases, these platforms can connect to. So as long as there's active drivers and the databases are supported, most platforms today can really tap into that. But there's a variety, it varies in terms of the methods and how they actually pull the data. Here's a question. Is it difficult to implement a solution like this where you're deploying budgeting, planning, and data visualization with one system? Well, not necessarily. It all comes down again to requirements, but usually when we work with our clients, we do it in a phased approach. So as the best practice, we break it out into multiple phases, and obviously you go for that low-hanging fruit, get the stuff that provides the most value to the company first. And obviously you give your team enough timelines as well so you can test and validate, and then obviously work and make sure that your end users are trained and ready to go for, say, the budget cycle. All right, it doesn't look like we have any more questions, but of course, if you want to reach out, please feel free to contact us. We obviously, if there's questions related to the budgeting and planning process, we can provide some help there, or if it's system related, different platforms, let us know. We gladly help you and your team, help you address any needs and challenges you may have. So that's it for the webinar. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.